very important. Including special procedures refused or cancelled
Good afternoon. My name is Jeanne Ben Yahya, and I will be moderating today's side event. Before we begin, let me just remind you that interpretation is available in Arabic and English, that the event is live streamed on WebEx and MENA Rights Group YouTube channel, and please also note that photos and videos are prohibited unless explicitly authorized. Thank you for your understanding. So I am pleased to welcome you today for our side event on 15 years of reprisals in the MENA region, trends and abuses in the name of security and counterterrorism. This side event is held in the margin of the 16th session of the Human Rights Council and is co-sponsored by MENA Rights Group, International Service for Human Rights, Civicus, and the Global Center on Cooperative Security. So yesterday, on Wednesday, 24th of September, the UN Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights, Ilse Brand-Keres, presented the UN Secretary General's annual report on cooperation with the UN, its representatives and mechanism in the field of human rights before the 16th session of the Human Rights Council. The report highlights numerous cases of reprisals against individuals and CSOs engaging or cooperating with the UN. According to the ASG, reprisals can be defined as intimidation, retaliation, or punishment, and can take many forms: arbitrary arrests and detention, travel bans, online and offline surveillance, threats, smear campaign, and so on. The report notes also an important trend. More than half of the states apply or continue to apply laws and regulations concerning civil society, counterterrorism, and national security, and that have had the effect of deterring or hindering cooperation with the United Nations. In a report published by MENA Rights Group today, it appears that 60% of reprisal cases in the MENA region are linked to the abuse of security or counterterrorism framework. Since 2010, the region has consistently been the most affected globally, accounting for nearly 1/3 of all documented incidents. With this in mind, the objective of today's discussion is to address how counterterrorism and national security laws are being weaponized as tools of reprisals in the MENA region. To discuss this matter, I have the privilege to moderate this panel with distinguished experts, starting with Mary Lawlor, UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders, and Gina Romero, UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Peaceful Assembly and Association, both via video message. Lina Al-Hathloul, activist and sister of Saudi human rights defender Lujain Al-Hathloul. Nidal Al-Salman, Director of Bahrain Center for Human Rights, Vice President of FIDH. Tanya Bulakovsky, Human Rights Officer, MENA Rights Group. Kifaya Haraim, International Advocacy Officer, Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counseling. And last but not least, Lucy McKernan, UN Deputy Director at Human Rights Watch Office in Geneva. So to open our discussion, we will first hear the video intervention of Mary Lawlor, and I believe that the one from Gina Romero is not working. So yeah, we will only listen to Mary Lawlor. Thank you.
The issue of reprisals has always been very important for me, and since I took on the role of Special Rapporteur, it has assumed a new meaning for me. Throughout my mandate, I have constantly heard reports of reprisals against human rights defenders who have addressed, sent documents or messages to, or cooperated with the United Nations, including special procedures mandate holders. The idea that a human rights defender would be harmed for talking to me or sending me information is abhorrent and something which deeply unsettles me. From the Secretary-General reports on reprisals against those cooperating with the UN, it emerges that the Middle East and North Africa, the MENA region, is the most affected, with around 29% of all reprisals documented in such reports since 2010 being in this region. I have seen cases of intimidation and reprisals against human rights defenders from MENA countries with my own eyes. In Geneva, where human rights defenders from the region sometimes face obstacles in attending UN sessions or are totally barred from travelling. And during my country visit to Algeria, where sadly some human rights defenders I intended to meet refused or cancelled at the last minute for fear of reprisals. Reprisals can take various forms, including personal threats or threats against family members back home, smear campaigns, travel bans, death threats, and physical attacks, judicial and administrative harassment, and other forms of intimidation. I am alarmed by the number and gravity of these acts across the MENA region, not least in Egypt, Bahrain, Algeria, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Israel is also a case in point, as the head of a prominent Israeli organization has been the victim of online threats after addressing the Human Rights Council. In the MENA region, most reprisal cases appear to be connected to the use by state authorities of counter-terrorism and national security legislation frameworks as tools to target human rights defenders and civil society with fabricated accusations. The human rights defenders may remain detained without trial for years or sentenced to long prison terms in unfair trials. For example, lawyer and human rights defender Ibrahim Metwali has been held in pre-trial detention in Egypt for years as a result of the addition of new cases with clearly identical terrorism charges in a practice commonly known as rotation. These charges seem to be directly linked to his human rights work and interaction with UN human rights mechanisms, as he was arrested in 2017 while boarding a plane to Geneva to meet with the Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances. The use of national security and counter-terrorism frameworks becomes a deterrent for human rights defenders, silencing them and creating a chilling effect on the exercise of their rights and freedoms. It also perpetuates a climate of fear where human rights defenders exercise self-censorship and are afraid of doing their legitimate work. States themselves have become aware of the power of reprisals to silence defenders or prevent them from speaking out, and they often do their best to avoid international scrutiny, which is why the issue of reprisals must be exposed and amplified further, and I thank you for this. I urge states to uphold their responsibilities, refrain from committing such acts, and firmly and unequivocally condemn any forms of intimidation or reprisals. Thank you.
Great. I would like now to turn to Tanya, who will present the findings of MENA Rights Group's new report, which analyzes all UN documented reprisal cases in the MENA region over the past 15 years and the link identified with the abuse of counterterrorism and security measures. Tanya, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So yesterday, during the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, the Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights presented the UN Secretary General's annual report on reprisals for cooperation with the UN. And ahead of the publication of this UN report in April of this year, we at MENA Rights Group submitted a shadow report to inform the 2025 UN reprisals report on the issue of reprisals in the Middle East and North Africa. Our report specifically analyzes the relationship between two key human rights issues we have observed in the region. One, the MENA region is the most affected by reprisals worldwide, with almost 300 cases, making up nearly 1/3 of all cases documented by the UN. And two, accusations of terrorism or accusations of threats to security are systematically abused by state authorities to target and silence human rights defenders, government critics, peaceful protesters, and NGOs. So with this in mind, our goal with this report was to understand how many acts of reprisals are committed in the name of security and counterterrorism. So to conduct our study, we analyzed all cases of state-led reprisals across the MENA region, which have been documented by the UN in the past 15 years, since the UN Secretary General began recording these incidents in 2010. We operated on a country-by-country basis, taking into account the 22 countries of the Arab League and Israel, given that all reprisals cases involving Israeli authorities concern individuals or organizations who are Palestinian, who are based in Palestine, or whose work is related to Palestine. And we assessed case by case whether the act of reprisal had a connection with security or counterterrorism. So we concluded that there was a connection, for example, in cases where the person was charged for terrorism offenses because they engaged with the UN. So regarding our findings, to give you a few figures, we found that 62%, or more than 6 in 10 cases of reprisals in the MENA region, are connected to counterterrorism or security measures. Egypt accounts for 30 reprisals cases linked to counterterrorism, which is the highest number in the region. And in 7 countries, there is a complete correlation between reprisals and security measures. In Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Oman, Somalia, Lebanon, and Tunisia, 100% of documented reprisals cases involve counterterrorism or security elements. So the analysis also reveals the impact of reprisals against organizations engaging with UN mechanisms, with terrorism designations leading to asset freezes, office raids, and sometimes dissolution. Israel stands out for having targeted the highest number of organizations, 15 in total, all under abusive security or terrorism-related accusations. So overall, our findings really confirm that we have what we have long documented through our human rights work, which is that accusations of terrorism or accusations of threats to security have become repressive governments' tool of choice to punish those who dare speak to the UN about human rights violations. And this issue is key, as every act of reprisal not only harms those targeted, but also perpetuates a climate of fear and a climate of self-censorship among activists and civil society. And this weakens the entire UN human rights system at a time when it is most needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tanya, for this overview. I would like now to turn to Lucy. Lucy, could you provide us some insights on the issue of reprisals, specifically in Egypt, Tunisia, the UAE, and Jordan, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and hello, everyone. Unfortunately, reprisals against civil society and human rights defenders and the misuse of counter-terrorism laws and other security sector abuses is a big part of Human Rights Watch's work in the MENA region. So today I'd like to share examples with you from 4 different countries on which we work, and I think it'll demonstrate also how the methods used by different regimes in the region and elsewhere are unfortunately very similar. So starting with Egypt, many human rights defenders, pro-democracy activists and critics have faced reprisals under the government of President al-Sisi since 2014 and in the name of national security. The government has arrested, prosecuted and labelled as terrorists, dozens of them, to punish their peaceful activism. Authorities used laws such as the Penal Code, the 2015 Counter-Terrorism Law and the 2014 Terrorist Entities Law to detain, prosecute and punish human rights defenders and civil society activists. And this includes the November 2020 detention of Ghassan Abdel Razek and 2 of his colleagues from the Egyptian Initiative for Personal Rights, and the harsh sentencing in March 2023 of lawyer Ezet Ghanem, the director of the Egyptian Centre for Rights and Freedoms, and his colleagues in retaliation for their human rights work. Due to continuous harassment and reprisals, many organisations have been forced to shut their operations or to leave the country. In January 2022, the Arab Network for Human Rights Information was one of Egypt's leading independent human rights organisations, and it announced it was ending operations after nearly 18 years, citing a series of threats, violent attacks and arbitrary arrests by the National Security Agency, as well as severe restrictions under the 2019 NGO law. Authorities targeted some of the most prominent human rights organisations and defenders in the case 173 of 2011, known as the foreign funding case, in which authorities prosecuted dozens of people for receiving foreign funds. Authorities have used arbitrary travel bans and asset freezes to target human rights lawyers, journalists, feminists and researchers for their peaceful work. Activists and human rights defenders in exile have also faced several forms of transnational repression from Egyptian authorities acting unlawfully outside of Egypt. And some activists were also punished for their work with the UN mechanisms and here in Geneva, as also mentioned by the Special Rapporteur, a specific case in that regard. Turning now to Jordan. For years, Jordanian authorities have systematically moved to crush civic space using vague and abusive laws and justifying repression in the name of counter-terrorism and national security. Peaceful critics, journalists and activists are routinely, under Penal Code Article 149, prosecuted for, and I quote, subverting the political regime, and the 2006 anti-terrorism law for disturbing relations with a foreign state, and also the 2015 cybercrime law for online speech. In 2023, Parliament rushed through cybercrime amendments that dramatically increased penalties for online speech. They introduced vague new offences such as fake news and character assassination and created sweeping powers to police social media. These measures, enforced through the State Security Court and intelligence services, give the government unchecked authority to censor, surveil and jail critics, all in the name of preserving stability. Civil society, unions and political parties were among those hardest hit. Authorities dissolved the Teachers' Syndicate after mass protests, imposed onerous restrictions on NGO foreign funding and targeted activists, journalists and party members with arbitrary detention, interrogations, travel bans and harassment. Turning now to the United Arab Emirates, scores of critics are serving lengthy sentences in UAE prisons following unfair trials on vague and broad terrorism charges that violate their rights to free expression and association. In 2024 and 2025, the authorities convicted 83 defendants and meted out sentences ranging from 10 years to life in prison, following an unfair mass trial, the UAE's second largest, which was marred by due process and fair trial violations. The UAE announced terrorism-related charges against these individuals in 2023 under the country's deeply flawed counter-terrorism law. The charges appear to come from the UAE's abusive 2014 counter-terrorism law, which sets punishments of up to life imprisonment and even death for anyone who sets up, organises or runs such an organisation. Emiratis authorities have designated as terrorist 11 dissidents and their relatives and 8 companies, reflecting the country's indiscriminate use of overbroad counter-terrorism laws and contempt for due process. The UAE's counter-terrorism law allows the executive branch to designate individuals and entities as terrorists without any requirement to demonstrate an objective basis for the claim. Finish up. Stop or finish up. Okay. Thank you. Moving now to Tunisia. Since Kais Saied's power grab, Tunisian authorities have intensified their crackdown on dissent, relying increasingly on unfounded counter-terrorism-related charges to stifle perceived critics for the exercise of their fundamental rights. In the past months, dozens of people, including prominent opposition figures, lawyers and activists, were sentenced in mass trials that lacked due process protections to long prison terms on vague charges, including of terrorism and conspiracy against state security. Tunisia's 2015 law on the fight against terrorism and the repression of money laundering provides for the death penalty for several offences and lacks the necessary safeguards against abuse. It allows the authorities to hold a suspect in custody for 15 days and denies them access to legal counsel for the first 48 hours. And the legislation also guarantees anonymity for witnesses and informants and permits the court to close hearings to the public. All of these provisions restricting the rights of the accused to an effective defence. I had more, but I will stop there because we have limited time, but I'm happy to answer questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lucy, for these thoughtful insights. I would like now to turn to you, Lina. Your sister, Lujain Al-Hathloul, has been mentioned several times in the various reprisal reports. Can you tell us about the reprisal that she faced throughout these years? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Lina Al-Hathloul, sister of Lujain Al-Hathloul, who's a prominent Saudi human rights defender. She was leading the Women to Drive campaign and also trying to abolish the male guardianship system in Saudi Arabia. My sister Lujain in 2018 was here in Geneva at the CEDAW committee. Basically, she was following the new Saudi Arabia's legislation and reforms and the narrative that the state was giving to the world. And she was basically tweeting about it and fact-checking what was being said. After that conference, she went back to the Middle East, to the UAE, precisely, where she was living back then. A couple of weeks later, she was kidnapped from the Emirates and brought back to Saudi Arabia against her will, where she was forcibly disappeared. And put under an illegal travel ban. Months later, she was then forcibly arrested and forcibly disappeared, brutally tortured. And back then, we did not know anything about her. Months later, we found out that what she was being accused of was basically her activism, and she was being tried in the Specialized Criminal Court, which is the court that deals with terrorism cases, and she was charged under the counter-terrorism laws as well. During that time also, they have all banned my family from traveling, so it was not only about Lujain, it was my whole family who was under a travel ban. And just to note that because it is a security issue, no, they have not been notified with this travel ban and only find out about it when they try to travel. Just to say, so I'll try to be brief. So what is important to know when someone is being charged in the counterterrorism court in Saudi Arabia, it means that they are being tried behind closed doors. They are not notified with the dates of the trial, or if they are, it's only just before the trial. The charge sheets are forbidden from being published or shared with anyone. And when they are accused of anything, so for example, my sister was accused of contacting Amnesty International and precisely one researcher, she is not allowed to ask for this researcher to come and testify in court to give her version of the story of why they were communicating. So it's basically, accusations that she can't even challenge. And this is why also, but I'll conclude with this, that it's very important for diplomats to try and attend these hearings. The second thing about the travel bans, I think we underestimate the hardships that come with travel bans. It's when my sister was released, everyone was very, very happy about her being released and that she was free. And I just disagree with the word free, because when you live in a country where you have been designated as a terrorist and that you cannot leave, you do not know why you cannot leave, and you know that you're constantly being monitored, it's really far from freedom. And when they add to that the fact that your family is also threatened with a travel ban, so just potential arrest anytime, it's yes, I think that it's as important as a prison case. So it took my sister 1,001 days to be released, and she was officially sentenced with a travel ban. And this official sentence, which was 3 years and some of a travel ban, should have been lifted on the 12th of November 2023. And after this date, she remains under a travel ban, but her criminal record is clean. My family's criminal record is clean. So there is no evidence of this travel ban anywhere. And this is where it becomes interesting to see that the state security of Saudi Arabia really they behave in a way that is unlawful, unconstitutional, whatever, and we cannot even challenge this. So my sister tried in December 2023 to challenge this travel ban, and she filed a judicial complaint to the Diwan al-Madhalim, which is an administrative court in the royal court, against the travel ban, against the state security. And the state security, then the judge basically said that they don't have any jurisdiction. And they just leave her with this message. So she cannot challenge this travel ban. She cannot, it's just so complicated, because then you don't have evidence of what you are being inflicted. So my sister remains under a travel ban, my family remains under a travel ban, and we don't see any end to it. And the only way we can really act upon it is for everyone to believe civil society when we speak, and to be allies and to stand in solidarity, and not to underestimate the impact of travel bans. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'll conclude at the end. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lina, for your testimony. Now I would like to turn to Nidal. So Nidal, you come from Bahrain, as you said earlier, and you have yourself faced reprisals in your country. So can you tell us more about the reprisals you faced, and also just more generally about the situation in Bahrain? Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'll speak with you today on behalf of Bahrain Center for Human Rights, as well on behalf of FIDH. We wanted to draw attention to how counter-terrorism laws and national security, as what we call it in Bahrain, are systematically used as a tool for reprisals against activists, against human rights defenders. First of all, I always like to start my speech by saying, what is my name, Nidal? Nidal, it has a big story. Why I'm called Nidal? Because who speaks Arabic will understand. Nidal is struggle for your right, because I was born the same day my father was arrested and tortured with his cousin, who was later forced to exile, and his nationality was revoked also by the use of counter-terrorism law. So Bahrain is not something new when it comes to how they target activists, how they silence everybody. But it's very good that we have those spaces to speak up after years of struggling, after years of fighting to find an end. Of course, according to the MENA rights group, Bahrain was one of the most represented countries in the MENA region across the UN reprisal report. That really reflects the problem of how Bahrain used this practice. Of course, Bahrain target peaceful protesters with terrorism law. authority used these laws to criminalize freedom of expression, association, and assembly. Any tweets, any engagement with the UN have all been labeled with terrorism threats. Human rights defender has suffered directly with these laws. I myself was targeted because of my work. My voice was my crime. I was travel banned after participation in 2016 in the United Nations. And I was on and off travel ban for 3 years. And the cases, of course, against me was engaging with the UN. This is how we face it. Also, the reprisal against us. Like, I am one of hundreds activists in Bahrain. I received a call in 2021 from Citizen Lab telling me that my number was one of the numbers which is a victim of Pegasus and a virus which is used. And I was surprised. Why will a country pay this much when we are doing all what we do because we love our country and we want the best of our country? So I'm not the only one. Lots of activists, lawyers have been targeted with Pegasus. I'll speak about activists who've been targeted. One of a very important name, Abdelhadi Al-Khawaja, who's sentenced for life in prison in a military court. This is again because of his peaceful human rights work. I believe most of you know the name of Abdelhadi Al-Khawaja because he's very well-known human rights defender. There is Ibtisam Saikh. She was here this morning, and I was hoping that she will be here. She was detained and tortured again for engagement with the UN. And we have here a very important two activists here, or more than one activist, but I have a lawyer who's been targeted for his human rights work. And he'd been targeted, he was asked to be silenced, he's among us here. He was asked to be silenced, but he refused to be silenced, and he was targeted with his personal life. This is how the government used these laws, and this is how they target human rights defender. People who work just for the sake of their country. He was targeted. Mohammed Al-Tajir, a very important, a very respected lawyer in Bahrain. He is among us here, and I hope we'll have a time to hear his testimony. Of course, not only individuals, face intimidation, even children in Bahrain. Children have been targeted and they are behind bars. In 2000, only this year, 35 children has been jailed since January till June, just for protesting and by the use of national security. This climate, like all civic space has been closed, everybody has been silenced, everybody is afraid to speak because Bahrain reprisal are normalized. They believe that they can do anything and nothing can stop them. And what we want from this platform, this is very important for us because we've been silent and forgotten. Bahrain is a forgotten country. What we need from this platform, we need the member states to press on Bahrain to amend counter-terrorism law aligned with international standards. We need the UN bodies to continue documenting reprisal and to ensure accountability when defenders are punished just for cooperating with the UN. We need to be recognized because for our peaceful human rights work, we are human rights defender. We are not terrorism. We do this because we love our country. And the reality, what we face in Bahrain, it's very harsh. Like, we are forgotten. We rarely read about Bahrain. We rarely read the news about Bahrain, like if we don't exist. And when you even speak to organization, we are not the priority because lots of other countries have bigger issue, but we are suffocated. We need support. We need to be heard. We need something to happen because we can't. I was born in the year my father was struggling for, and I don't want to finish my life without seeing some change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nidal, for sharing your story. Thank you. Now, last but not least, I would like to turn to you, Kifaya. So just quickly mentioning that according to MENA Rights Group report, Israel is the country with the highest number of CSOs targeted by reprisals in the region, and all cases are linked to counterterrorism and security laws. So with this in mind, could you please reflect on the climate of reprisals facing Palestinian CSOs, including the abuse of counterterrorism and security laws by Israeli authorities? Thank you so much.
Thank you all. I just wanted to say that it's really interesting that you were targeted by an Israeli spyware Pegasus. And this is one of the things that I wanted to reflect on as well, is one of the methods that they use to have retaliate against human rights defenders in Palestine. When I read the concept of this side event, and I wanted to see how can I reflect about all the things and all the reprisals and retaliations that are being carried against human rights defenders and organizations. And I could only think of that on the 6th of February 2025, when the US president decided to sanction the ICC for doing its work to issue arrest warrants against war criminals, Netanyahu and Gallant, and then later on with the sanctioning of the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the occupied Palestinian territory, Francesca Albanese, for doing her job of reporting on the situation of human rights in the OPT. Following that, we had the sanctioning of 3 Palestinian human rights organizations, Al-Haq, the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, and Al-Mizan, for simply doing their work of reporting on the human rights situations and the war crimes and conveying that to the ICC. These organizations will soon no longer be able to conduct their work for being sanctioned by the US and having all of their monetary and funds and the bank accounts suspended. And if this is what is being done in public, you can only imagine what happens behind closed doors, aka in the occupied Palestinian territories and in Gaza as well. And for that, I was thinking how to try to convey the situation, because the anti-terrorism and counter-terrorism law applies to completely different population that is for the rest of us. In Gaza, the reprisals and retaliations against human rights defenders is when their bodies and their families of the journalists, human rights defenders, NGOs, and aid workers, their bodies and their families are fair game to be assassinated and maimed. And for that, we have over 300 journalists completely assassinated in the Gaza Strip, including, as many of you may know, journalists working at very prominent TV and news channels. This is in addition, obviously, to detention, sexual violence, and rape that we have documented against women. In the West Bank, no laws apply as well. So it's the laws of the jungle. You get detained, you get sexually violated, you get raped. We have interviewed over 90 women who were detained from the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem for simply doing their work of reporting on the situation and for having an opinion and for speaking out against the atrocities. For that, we have documented that 80% of them were sexually assaulted in Israeli detention centers, including being raped by Israeli female soldiers using inspection devices. One of the methods that get used also as well to retaliate against human rights defender is there's so many creative ways. I don't know if I should call it creative, but you have a lot of people doing a lot of work on this, and you get, for example, threatening phone calls on your phone by Israeli military commanders calling you and telling you, if you go again on the media, we're taking you to prison, or you lose your family members. This is in addition to being summoned for interviews. You get summoned for interview at a certain time, certain location, and if you fail to show up, you will be detained along with your family. For that, we have documented cases against amazing women, including Ahad al-Tamimi, who is an outspoken woman against the atrocities of settlers and the Israeli forces in her village. We have also documented similar things against Diala Ayesh, who was a lawyer who did pro bono work to visit detainees, Palestinian detainees in Israeli detention centers. And Asma Ihresh, who's also a journalist. And I can go on with the names, but I don't have many time. All of these women were detained and tortured, and they also faced travel bans, which is horrific. I agree, Lina. It's not talked about enough how suffocating it is to have travel ban. For that reason, even me and Randa we're not sure if we go back because of the closed bridge. In Jerusalem, it's completely different than the West Bank and Gaza. So if you're a Jerusalemite, you have to face so many different retaliatory acts. So you might get your citizenship revoked, you might be denied family unification, and you might also face travel bans, not being able to travel outside of the territories as well. Spyware that is being used and developed in Israel also is being used against the human rights defenders, and I wouldn't be surprised if other oppressive governments have used that. as a method to retaliate against people. Anti-terrorism and counter-terrorism laws, which many laws have been enacted. And this was ever since the election of the most right-wing Israeli government in 2022. We were here at the UN and we were talking, ringing alarms and saying, this is unprecedented, the kind of violence and the changes in laws. And I encourage you to take a look at the Commissions of Inquiry report of July 2023 that was published, specifically talking about the setback of the situation of civil society organizations in Israel and in Palestine. Many laws were enacted, including the anti-boycott law. So if you ever called for the boycotting of Israel, you'd be denied entry. You would have no visa if you're a human rights worker who's trying to visit Palestine. We have the counter-terrorism laws being amended, including after October 7th, the consuming of content that might be considered to be encouraging of terrorist acts. So even if you watch too many reels about the situation, you will be detained for a year. They can use that against you in counter-terrorism law. And I need to remind you that the Minister of National Security, the Israeli Minister of National Security, was convicted for terrorist acts. We have also the laws of association and the budget and on foundations law, which would tax organizations that have funding from foreign governments of 80%, up to 80% taxation, rendering many organizations that do a lot of work in Jerusalem and in Israel as well useless at this point. These are many of the things that I try to maybe sum up within this 5 minutes, but I'll be free for questions following that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have a very short time for a Q&A. So please, raise your hand, ask your question, please, and specify like your name, organization, and which panelist you want to ask the question. Thank you. Khalid.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all the distinguished speakers and the moderator. And very quickly, like we have good documentation. The report of the Undersecretary is very much rich with information, or people are paying the cost. My question, what else we could do to protect the vendors in the MENA region? I mean, the reprisals, we know, always we are going to face reprisals, but what is missing is the protection. So could we think about another fair and effective mechanism to protect the vendors in the MENA region, so we could just cooperate normally like others with the UN system and with other mechanisms? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? Yes, please, over there.
Thank you very much. Rose, former Bahraini MP and victim of torture and living in exile. We can see a gradual disparate and unbelief on the UN mechanism within so many human rights defenders, because whatever action is being taken is related to the recommendations more than the action being taken against all these atrocities in the government. My major comment is toward the missions, how seriously they can be to upgrade the scales of the UN mechanism, and especially when revisions of the UPR, of any types of the recommendation they given, how much they can follow up. In the same time, many human rights defenders requesting that the council should give them guarantee that they will not be targeted and so on. We have so many cases and so many victims after they return from the council. They've been targeted, travel ban, and so on. Nowadays, a lot of soft types of the torture is being applied by banning them from travel, by not providing them good conduct where they can have the governmental services and so on. So there are serious issues that mostly the human rights defenders are trying to, get protected as much as possible. Thank you.
I see there is no question, so maybe we can just, I was told that the video from Gina Romero is working now, so maybe we can just watch it and then we can have some concluding remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon and thanks for the invitation. I am really sorry that I cannot be with you today. As you know, the MENA region has one of the closest restricted civic spaces in the world. The region is filled with cases of detention, persecution of human rights defenders and journalists, and censorship of civil society that takes many ways, but shows not only an intended persecution of dissenting voices, but also creates an impossibility to freely exercise the right of freedom of assembly, let alone the right to protest, and is creating a deep chilling effect on the exercise of rights in general. If we see the relation of the Middle East countries with the UN system and with us, special procedures, the situation is not easy. In relation to visits, for example, governments do not accept them or accept only some that from rapporteurs that they consider less problematic. The region, as today, has nearly 200 pending requests, and most of them haven't had a visit in around 10 years or more. About communications, excluding Israel and Palestine, the region has received in the past 5 years 355 letters that are public now, on average more than 20 per country. The rate of response is high, but some of the responses are even showing how far the region is from the human rights standards itself. From those letters, more than half have a relation with terrorism-related issues, even if the relation is not completely direct. Unfortunately, the trend of weaponizing counter-terrorism, anti-money laundering, and other similar settings and frameworks against civil society, activism, and collective action, including protests, have become a trend worldwide. This is being done not only by detaining protesters and activists on anti-terrorism-related charges, also by the inclusion of activists and civil society in terrorism listing that then leads to asset freezing, dissolutions of organizations, and harassments to their members and their families. They then become victims of counter-terrorism measures. Also, as it is the center of this event, the MENA region is the most affected globally across all UN reprisals reports, accounting for nearly 1/3 of all documented incidents. This shows then that the state's authorities are using counterterrorism and national security laws and frameworks as a tool to commit acts of reprisals against civil society, activists, human rights defenders, and other actors that are cooperating with the UN. The MENA rights group's analysis indicates that of the last 15 reprisals report, over 60% of cases in the MENA region were connected to the abuse of security or counterterrorism frameworks. All these actions are creating a deep impact in societies. Freedom of assembly and of association are enabling rights. They are at the center of the defense of rights, and therefore, when assembly and association are at risk, all risks are harmed. Besides, this creates a climate of fear that silences organizations and activists and also society itself. The UN and government needs to take more concrete measures to ensure that the violations of human rights, especially rights of freedom of expression, assembly, and of association in the MENA region, has a real cost in the participation of MENA countries in the international arena. Now that the UN Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy is being reviewed, they need to ensure not only that the counter-terrorism agenda is not weaponized against dissent, but also they need to guarantee reparations, justice, and no repetition for the counter-terrorism victims. We need to fight against counter-terrorism, but without harming risks and freedoms. Thank you.
Great. Well, we have 10 minutes now to go through some recommendation and conclusive remarks. So I will ask the panelists to start like this in the same order than earlier. So maybe we can just move with you, Tanya. Thank you.
To conclude, I think that we at MENA Rights Group, we really urge states to immediately cease all acts of reprisals and intimidation against those cooperating with the UN, as independent voices are vital to the functioning and the relevance of the entire international human rights system. And importantly, we want to urge states to cease abusing counterterrorism and security frameworks as a tool of repression. And as we heard, particularly from the testimonies of Kifaya, Lina, and Nidal, we see that the fight against terrorism continues to be weaponized to commit rights abuses, including arbitrary detention, torture, unfair trials, executions, and now the genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza. So it's imperative for the UN system and the international community to critically reassess whether the global fight against terrorism as it's been shaped since 9/11, has delivered on its promise, or whether it has instead legitimized repression and caused irreparable harm. And it's more than time to reconsider not just how counterterrorism is implemented, but whether it can continue to exist in its current form at all. Thank you.
Lucy, maybe.
Thanks very much. As some colleagues have already said, we have good documentation of what's happening, and we have good mechanisms to respond to what's going on. But what we don't have and what we need more of is states to be standing up and speaking up and creating a political cost for the abuse of human rights. So we need states to be speaking out, condemning the rights abuses and defending the important work of the human rights defenders. They need to be pressing governments to reopen civic space and respect the fundamental rights of their citizens. And I think this call is particularly important right now when we're seeing an erosion in international law and erosion of the human rights framework. States who believe in the rule of law and who believe in the importance of the ICC and the human rights mechanisms need to be speaking up to defend them and to defend the people behind them now. And, our colleague mentioned the attack on the Special Rapporteur for the OPT. We heard some pushback against that, but not enough. Not nearly enough states spoke up to defend that Special Rapporteur and to condemn the attack against her. We also call on states in bilateral agreements and in public statements to mention individual cases because we know that this can make a difference, and there's many cases to demonstrate the difference that this can make, including differences, for instance, to the conditions that people are facing in detention, and there's evidence of that. Also wanted to mention that states should not be allowing repressive states to whitewash their rights abuses and launder their images through big international sporting and cultural events. States should not be taking part in those events. And it's concerning to hear also of some proposals in the context of the UN liquidity crisis for some UN agencies to be moving to repressive states, including in the region, which would endanger civil society engagement in those spaces. And we saw a little bit of this in the climate COP27 in Egypt back in 2022, where there were some civil society actors who were subjected to surveillance and harassment. And finally, just to mention the role of the UN human rights bodies. We heard from the special rapporteurs, and I think they play a really vital role because they are independent experts. So we thank them for their work, and again, call on you as states to be supporting that work and defending them in public statements. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy. So we have less than 4 minutes to wrap up. So maybe Lina, Nidal, and Kifaya. Yeah.
1 minute.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, maybe I'll start by saying that it depends on the context, and I'll only be speaking about Saudi Arabia here to respond to your question, Ustad Khalid. For Saudi Arabia, I think that there are a couple of things. The first thing is inside Saudi Arabia. Again, I've said it, but it's very important for states to monitor, to try and monitor trials. Of course, they have been refused for a very long time now. Most recently, they've started to let some states monitor the hearings, but I see the Netherlands and Belgium are here, so they have tried a couple of times and with consistency to attend my sister's trial, so thank you for that. And it has led to changes, especially regarding my sister's charge with being in contact with a diplomat from the Netherlands. The second thing is, I think that, and Lucy, you've mentioned it a bit, we should not compartmentalize human rights. I think that the Geneva bubble is very important, but that the message has to be sent to capitals for other delegations going to these states. And I think about economic delegations going to Saudi Arabia, for example, they should be briefed on what is happening, and the human rights issues should not stay in this human rights bubble. Everyone should be aware and condition their engagement with such states, and mention specifically human rights defenders. Last thing, sorry, just to mention, just to be very clear with what is happening with Saudi Arabia, we have seen a big wave of releases in recent months of people who have been sentenced under counter-terrorism charges, which is a very welcome change, or I don't know how to call it, and that they are being, it's a new trend that we've been noticing, that they are being retried at the normal criminal court. And if this is really a structural change, then I really encourage the Saudi state to go ahead and completely clear these cases, because it has had a negative stance on its reputation. And I do hope that travel bans will also be part of this clearance, and that human rights defenders won't be prosecuted under terrorism charges anymore. Thank you.
We need a protection mechanism for human rights defender at risk. We need the states publicly condemn reprisal when it happens, and the UN bodies and mechanism should adopt a zero tolerance policy on reprisal. But we ask every single person here, either an NGO, journalist, stand with us and speak on our behalf when we are silenced, because we depend on you. So anybody, be our voices, because we've been silenced. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Faya, please.
It's not about Palestine anymore. I always like to say, if you sanction the ICC and you sanction the most supreme entity to be prosecuting people who commit genocide, and then you sanction these people, then it's not about Palestine anymore. Things should be done. Member states should be sanctioning, boycotting, and divesting from Israel as the entity of developing this much spyware that targets people all over the planet. One of the things also you can talk about is you can always pressure your elected representatives to take action against Israel, to cut diplomatic and economic ties, to actually exclude Israel from UEFA, for example. One of the things we also like to call for is to suspend Israel's membership in the UN because of how much they're targeting the special rapporteurs, how much they're targeting the UN entities to begin with. And also they're not allowing any mandate holders to even come to visit Israel or Palestine for that matter. Then why do you want to join the UN if you don't want to comply with any of its procedures and work? And also as individuals, you can always boycott. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the panelists, to the audience, and to the speakers. Thank you so much. Thank you.